Well, the sovereign debt roundtable discussions to discuss debt issues and debt restructuring issues of many countries, including Sri Lanka, will take place later this evening here in Marrakesh, Morocco. And this meeting will be chaired by the managing director of the International Monetary Fund and will also see creditor nations as well as multilateral and bilateral creditors also taking part to reach an agreement or consensus on debt restructuring and debt issues of certain countries. Representing News First, the only Sri Lankan news agency here at the 2023 IMF and World Bank annual meetings in Marrakesh, Morocco, I'm Zulf Farzan.
The IMF Managing Director spoke to reporters earlier in the day to comment on the common framework to tackle debt issues.
I say be firm and relentlessly pursue the objective of delivering for the countries that need debt restructuring, easing of the burden of debt. The common framework has been slow to deliver to countries that turn to it for support. But we see an encouraging sign that the time taken to reach an agreement among creditors is shortening with every step. It took 11 months for the creditors of Chad, to provide the fund with financial assurances needed for us to help the country. So from our staff level agreement to going to board, 11 months. It took 9 months for Zambia, 6 months for Sri Lanka, 5 months for Ghana. And now we have discussions ongoing on Ethiopia, and I hope this trend will be sustained. We need to assess objectively and realistically. Debt cancellation requires all creditors to agree. Having the cacophony of creditors and their different configuration in every single case makes this excruciatingly difficult.
Meanwhile, a closed-door event titled Sri Lanka Pathways to Debt Sustainability and Governance Reform will be held today alongside the International Monetary Fund annual meetings in Marrakesh, Morocco, hosted by organizations connected to the Sri Lankan Civil Society Initiative on Anti-Corruption Reform for Economic Recovery. The event will focus on two key priorities in steering Sri Lanka to recovery from its debt crisis: the two recent governance diagnostics on Sri Lanka by civil society and the IMF, and the role of the IMF, the government and the country's creditors in achieving a successful and sustainable restructuring of Sri Lanka's debt. The Civil Society Governance Diagnostic Report on the anti-corruption landscape of Sri Lanka was released in mid-September. This was a comprehensive set of 34 governance reform recommendations for Sri Lanka, aimed at addressing the root causes of Sri Lanka's current crisis. In late September, the IMF released its governance diagnostic on Sri Lanka, which is the first ever IMF governance diagnostic in Asia. These two governance diagnostics have the potential to establish a solid foundation for improving rule of law, transparency and accountability. They will be discussed at the event, as improvements in debt governance are vital to prevent countries from experiencing recurrent debt problems. The event will also delve deeper into the need for stricter debt sustainability targets, including significant haircuts with Sri Lanka's external creditors that would reduce the overall debt stock. IMF Senior Mission Chief for Sri Lanka, Peter Brewer, Verity Research Executive Director Dr. Nishan Dimel, Transparency International Sri Lanka Executive Director Nadishani Pereira, and Global Sovereign Advisory Senior Research Analyst Theo Moret will be speaking and answering questions. Invitees for this closed-door event include several executive directors of the IMF board, regional heads of multilateral institutions, a number of major stakeholders and professionals, and the top-ranking members of the Sri Lankan delegation to the IMF annual meeting in Marrakesh.